Hello students. This is your first video for creative nonfiction, and I'm going to talk first about what creative nonfiction is, and then we're going to jump into finding a topic for your own creative nonfiction and figuring out what to do with that topic once you have it. So let's begin. The goal of creative nonfiction, or the personal essay, personal narrative essay, all of these terms are interchangeable, is to use something that happened to you, a personal experience that you have, to try to communicate a universal truth or lesson to your audience, to your readers. And when I say personal experience, I mean something that happened to you, ideally something that specifically happened to you. It can be something that you witnessed, something that happened to someone else that you happened to see, as long as that experience affected you very deeply. And as long as you're able to write about it in a way that shows how much it affected you. When I talk about universal, a universal truth or a universal lesson, what I mean is that this lesson or truth is something that appeals to a wider audience, or something that a wider audience can learn from. It doesn't have to be literally universal, so not necessarily something that every single person in the universe can learn from, but it should appeal to a wider group. And you should remember when you're thinking about this, that even people who are outside of this wider group can still benefit from learning about your experience. This is part of the reason that creative writing exists, that people read other people's short stories and other people's essays, is because it's good for us to be exposed to the lives of others, and other people's lives are interesting. All right, let's move on to how to choose a topic. You have pick an experience that affected you, think about what it meant to you, and then analyze what you learned or how you changed. So when you're picking an experience that affected you deeply, you want to choose something that you can write about vividly. So this is going back to the lessons that we learned in poetry, which we also applied in short fiction. You want to be able to recreate this experience for your reader. And again, this should be something that happened to you, not just something you witnessed, ideally. Although witnessing can work if you have a very deep personal connection with what happened, if it affected you very deeply, emotionally, in some way, that can also work. But really, ideally, you should choose something that happened to you. Next, you want to think about what that experience meant to you. What did it mean at the time? And why is it still something that you consider important? So how did it affect you? What meaning did it have then? And why is it still changing your life? Why is it something that you still think of as something that changed your life? Then finally, analyze what you learned or how you changed. Again, this ties into why you still consider it important, how it made you think differently about the world or something like that. And then consider what universal lesson you can draw from this. How can other people learn from the thing that happened to you? How can you teach people based on your experience? Once you've done that, you can put all that information into an essay. And while you're reading the essays that are assigned for the class for this unit, you can get different ideas of how essays are shaped from that. But here is a possible shape of a personal essay that is pretty easy to just plug and play with the information that you have. You start with a vivid personal experience, something that happened to you, write about it in a way that draws the reader in, then analyze, comment on the experience, what it meant for you, how it changed your life. Make sure that the lesson becomes clear. What you want your audience to get out of this should be clear in that central part. And then you want to end talking about, again, vividly, a more recent experience that shows how you've applied the lesson that you learned from the first experience. So we start with a vivid personal experience, analyze it, talk about the lesson, and then end with a vivid personal experience that shows you applying that lesson. This is, again, just a sample essay template. You do not necessarily have to follow this. There are other ways that you can do it, and all of the readings for the class give different ways that you can do this thing. And all of the essays for the class have different levels of personal. Some things that people talk about are much more emotional. Some things are much less. And it's up to you how you want to approach the thing. All right, we have a writing exercise for the week. You're going to make a couple of lists of experiences, your most memorable experiences, and then also a list of experiences that changed your life, which there can be some overlap between these lists. There will probably be some overlap between these lists, in fact, but they are different lists. Some things that happened to me that changed my life are different from my most memorable experiences. I remember a lot of things that didn't really affect my life that deeply. And then once you've made these lists, what I want you to do is pick one thing that appears on one or both of the lists and then write down every single vivid detail you can remember about the experience. Again, when you're choosing a topic, you want to think of things that happened long enough ago that you can talk about them with some distance, but you still want to be able to talk about them vividly. So when you get to this point, write every single vivid sensory detail you can about what happened to you. You don't need to use full sentences. The full instructions for this are up on Blackboard. So, all right, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.